What on earth is extreme macro photography and how exactly does it work? Maybe I can help. Hi, my name is Joe. I'm a macro photographer, which means I take large images of tiny things. And in this video, I'm going to show you everything you need to know to take pictures like these. First things first, what exactly is ultra or extreme macro photography? Simply put, extreme macro photography is photography at a scale larger than 1:1 magnification. What do I mean by that? Let me show you. Every camera has an image sensor. The image sensor comes in different sizes. The camera I'm using to film this video and the camera I use to take my pictures is an APS-C sized mirrorless camera. That means the camera sensor on my camera is roughly this size. I cut out the size of my sensor so I can show you how magnification in macro photography actually works. Normal macro photography happens when you take a picture of something and that something you're photographing is the same size on the camera sensor as it is in real life. That sounds a bit complicated, so let me show you with an insect so you can understand what I mean. So I found a dead woodlouse the other day, and a normal macro photo at 1:1 magnification of this woodlouse would basically be framed like this. So the image ends up looking like this. It's the same size on the camera sensor as it is in real life. That's why we call it 1:1 magnification. Entering into the world of ultra macro photography means you're going to go even closer to your subject. And there are lenses on the market that offer higher magnification rates than 1:1 magnification. Laowa has quite a few of them. This one here is a 65mm macro lens, for example, that will take you all the way from infinity down to 1:1 magnification, and then it will let you go even closer up to 2:1 magnification. So taking another look at our woodlouse, this is what framing at 2:1 should look like. And as you can see, if we take the picture, there is a lot more detail to be found because we're getting closer. Technically, this is already considered ultra macro photography because it's more than 1:1 magnification. But of course, the real fun begins when we go even closer. For example, this is what a 5:1 magnification will look like. This tiny area will be your entire photo. That means the louse's head will pretty much fill the frame at this point. And if we take a look at this image, you can see just how much more detail we can see. In ultra macro photography, the actual part of your image that is in focus is absolutely tiny. I mean, it's less than 1mm. So how do we solve this problem of the depth of field? How can we get more of our image in focus? The problem with ultra macro photography is there are two challenges we face, and both of these challenges enhance each other. The first challenge is something known as the effective aperture. Basically what happens is the higher the magnification rate, the larger the f-stop number becomes. So if you have a lens with an aperture of 2.8 and you open that lens up to f2.8, shooting at 1:1 magnification, that f2.8 becomes an f5.6. And that trend of aperture numbers going up skyrockets the closer we focus. And when we're moving down to something like 5:1 magnification, then a reasonable f-stop number of, let's say, f8 becomes something crazy like f96. And that means diffraction is going to cause a lot of problems in ultra macro photography. What exactly is diffraction? To explain diffraction, I'm going to have to draw a picture for you. There's no other way for me to explain it. So you can basically imagine it like this. A camera lens in its most basic function works like this. Light reflects off of your subject, enters the lens, and then it hits a pixel on your camera sensor. If the aperture of the lens is stopped down and very small, then something strange happens with the light rays passing through the opening. Light rays will then enter into the lens and deviate from their intended path. In a way, the light scatters. Now think of your camera sensor. It's basically just a large grid of pixels. So with a very small aperture, the light ray intended for one pixel will hit that pixel, but it will also bleed out onto the surrounding pixels. And this in turn causes a softer or blurry image. So for a real-world example, I took this photo of a fly at f11 at 6:1 magnification, which means the effective aperture was somewhere around f70. And as you can see, it's a blurry mess. So long story short, stopping down the lens will not solve the problem of the super thin narrow depth of field. But is there a different way to solve the problem? Yes. The solution is called focus stacking. Focus stacking is a technique in photography where we don't take one image of the subject, but many images. And with each image, we adjust the focus a tiny little bit. For example, this photo here is a portrait of a common housefly. And as you can see, the depth of field is extremely thin. It's about 0.1 millimeters. Now, if I take a picture and then I adjust the focus by 0.1 millimeters, and then I take another picture and I adjust the focus again by 0.1 millimeters. Doing this, if I take about 50 images, then over the course of those 50 images, I will be moving the focal plane across the entire head of the fly. That means extreme macro photography is much more akin to scanning an object than it is to actually photographing an object. How do I adjust the focus at such a small scale, moving the focus in increments less than 1 millimeter? In order to do this, you're going to need something like this. This is a focusing rail. And the way this works is you can attach your camera to one of these and then very, very slowly twist the knob. And by twisting it, you can move the camera steadily and slowly either towards your subject or away from your subject. And by doing this, I'm able to adjust the focus on a very, very small scale. You may have already guessed it, but this kind of photography requires a subject that will not move, otherwise known as a dead subject. Now let me address two things before we proceed. First of all, this is not my go-to style of photography. 99% of the photos I take are taken of bugs and insects outside in the wild, and they are happy and they are alive and they are not disturbed in the process. This particular style of ultra macro photography, high magnification, detailed photos, is reserved for dead subjects. And I happen to find these dead subjects when I'm out and about. What typically happens is I'll be sitting somewhere in a bush, taking a picture of a butterfly or a spider or something, and then I will just find a dead wasp or a dead ant or a dead fly. And I normally have these little containers with me, and I just pop the bug inside and take it home. Which leads me to number 2. Please don't kill insects and spiders just to take pictures of them. There are plenty of dead bugs around anyway. You don't have to murder them just to get your photo. So where exactly do I find these subjects? Where can I find dead bugs and dead spiders? I can give you 3 simple tips. Tip number 1 is check your attic or your cellar. If you look around in an attic or a cellar, you are bound to find some dead spiders and dead bugs. They'll be a little dusty, but what you can do is carefully collect them and then clean them off with a soft paintbrush. Be very careful, and then you can get them quite clean and then use them as subjects for this type of photography. The second spot I can recommend to find dead bugs is a bit more specific. The bottom of the beehive. Bees tend to clean out the beehive on a regular basis, and what they do is they take all the sick bees and all the dead bees, they just drag them to the exit and throw them out onto the floor. And they also drag out any intruders to the beehive. So if a spider managed to get in or a hornet managed to get in, anything that got into the beehive and didn't survive will end up at the bottom of the beehive. So typically, if you find a beehive, you can actually find a little pile of dead bugs ready to shoot, just waiting for you. The third spot I can recommend for finding dead bugs and spiders is an ant hill. Ants gather pretty much everything they find on the floor. They pick up all the dead spiders, all the dead bugs, and what they do is they carry them to the anthill. That means if you look around an anthill, you will find tons of dead spiders and dead bugs. You might have to take it away from an ant, but that's okay. So we have our dead insect. For example, here is a rather large fly that I found a few days ago that is waiting to be photographed. What is the simplest way to get a picture of this fly at a magnification rate of something around 5:1 magnification? I'm going to show you exactly how I do this. To fixate the subject, I use these stainless steel insect pins. They're very thin and very sharp. I stab one into the insect, normally into the abdomen. Sometimes instead of stabbing, I dip the pin into some superglue and then place it onto the abdomen instead. To stand the pin up, I use some blue tack, but anything soft and malleable will work fine. I've screwed a tripod head directly to a thin piece of plywood that I can clamp directly to my desk. I find this to be a lot more secure than a tripod. Once it's clamped down, nothing moves. The focusing reel is attached to the tripod head, and the camera is attached to the focusing reel. The focusing reel allows me to move the camera towards and away from my subject. However, there is no up and down motion. Moving up and down is crucial for positioning the bug though, and that's why I use a small lab jack. For lighting, I simply curve one sheet of white office printing paper and tape it directly to the lab jack. This paper tunnel diffuses the light very evenly. Using the lab jack, I can precisely move the fly upwards until it's in the right position. For lighting, I use an SB600 speedlight attached with a flash cable. I mount it onto a small tripod and face it downwards at the paper tunnel. For the background, I have some pieces of cardboard I've painted with watercolors. That way I have a wide variety to choose from. Once everything is set up, I adjust the focus to the back end of my subject. In this case, the back of the fly's head. And after this, I turn on the camera's intervalometer. I set it to take one photo every 3 seconds, then I set it to somewhere between 50 and 150 shots depending on the subject. For this fly, I'm going with 50 photos. Every time the flash fires, I twist the screw of the focusing reel a tiny little bit. As for the camera settings, I use an ISO of 100 to 400, a shutter speed of 1/200th of a second, and an open aperture. In this case, that means f2.8. Of course, the effective aperture is much higher. The flash is set between 1/16th and 1/8th power. The exact settings always depend on the subject. Once I've taken all the photos, I need to stack them into one image. There are different options for this step. For example, you could use Photoshop, Affinity Photo, Helicon Focus, or Serene Stacker. I like to use Serene Stacker the most, so let me show you how that works. You simply select all of your photos and then drag them into the program. Serene offers 2 different methods for stacking. I like to use something called Pmax. All you have to do is click on Stack and then Align and Stack All with Pmax. Once you've clicked on this, you just wait for your image to stack. Once the image is stacked, you can export it and edit it in your editing software of choice. And that's it. That's how I take extreme macro photos. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you'd like to see more of me or my photography, you can find me on Instagram and YouTube under the name Diary of Creation. Till then, see you soon.